Some truths are not buried because they are shameful, but because they are fragile. Luna understood this better than anyone in the final weeks of her life, when the future she would never see pressed against her chest with quiet insistence. In those moments, as the certainty of her own ending became impossible to ignore, Luna made a decision that would alter the lives of others long after her voice fell silent. She chose not confession, not reconciliation, not public absolution. She chose protection. The letter, later revealed to be accompanied by a recorded video, was never meant to be found easily. Luna hid it among personal belongings no one would think to examine closely, items that carried no legal or financial significance, only memory. In it, her voice was steady, stripped of performance or desperation. She spoke not as a woman seeking forgiveness, but as a mother making arrangements. She revealed that she had given birth in secrecy, far from prying eyes, far from judgment. The child's existence was not a mistake, nor a consequence of fear. It was an act of defiance against a world that had already decided how Luna's story should end. In her message, Luna named Li as the one person she trusted to safeguard her child. Not Finn. Not Will Spencer. Not anyone connected to the legacy and expectations that had defined so much of her suffering. She believed Li alone possessed the strength to resist interference, the discipline to protect without attachment, and the resolve to endure isolation, if necessary. Luna did not frame this choice as rejection of others, but as realism. She understood how quickly love could turn possessive, how easily a child could become leverage, identity, or spectacle. After Luna's death, the world moved forward with unsettling speed. Mourning followed predictable patterns, grief expressed in public rituals that offered comfort but little truth. No one suspected that while candles burned and eulogies were spoken, a child existed somewhere beyond reach, breathing quietly into a future deliberately unclaimed. It was Li who found the baby, following instructions that required patience rather than urgency. She did not rush. She did not question. When she held the child for the first time, she understood immediately why Luna had chosen her. Li's decision to honor Luna's request was not born of sentiment. It was born of obligation. She knew the cost of secrecy, understood the moral weight of withholding truth, yet believed that exposure would be far more dangerous than silence. Will Spencer, with his entitlement disguised as concern, would never accept distance. Others would see the child as extension, proof, possession. Li refused to allow that future. She constructed a life defined by invisibility, placing the child somewhere safe, far from names that carried consequence. The secrecy was absolute. No photographs. No records that could be traced. The child's existence became something Li carried alone. Finn's discovery was accidental, the kind of coincidence that feels less like chance and more like inevitability. While sorting through old belongings, either Luna's or Li's, the line between them long blurred, he found what was never meant for him. The letter. The video. Luna's voice filled the space with calm certainty, unraveling everything he thought he knew. Finn listened in silence, his shock deepening with every word. Luna had not only had a child, she had deliberately entrusted that child to Li. The same Li who had lied to him. The same Li whose deceptions had fractured their relationship beyond easy repair. What unsettled Finn most was not the revelation itself, but the clarity of Luna's trust. She did not hesitate when naming Li. She did not express doubt. That certainty cut deeper than accusation ever could. It forced Finn to confront an uncomfortable truth. Luna had not seen him as the safest option. Whether out of fear, resentment, or realism, she had believed someone else could protect her child better than he could. Finn's internal conflict was immediate and consuming. As a doctor, as a man guided by ethics and transparency, he believed truth was not optional. A child's existence, especially one tied to powerful families and unresolved histories, could not remain hidden forever without consequence. Yet as he replayed Luna's message, he heard not manipulation, but intention. She was not asking Li to raise the child out of spite or secrecy alone. She was asking for protection from a world that had never been gentle. Li, confronted by Finn after the discovery, did not deny anything. She did not justify herself with emotion. She simply stated that she had done what was asked of her. Her loyalty was not to Finn's comfort, nor to social expectations, but to Luna's final decision. In her view, the child's safety outweighed every other consideration. Love, in this context, was not presence but restraint. The fracture between Finn and Li widened into something far more dangerous than betrayal. It became philosophical. Finn argued that secrecy could not last forever, that identity withheld would eventually become harm. Li countered that exposure would invite control, litigation, entitlement. She believed the child deserved a life free from legacy before it was defined by bloodlines and expectations. Neither was wrong. That was the cruelty of it. Finn found himself trapped between respect for Luna's wishes and the burden of knowledge. Keeping the secret made him complicit. Revealing it would violate a trust that Luna had placed deliberately beyond him. The knowledge altered how he saw everyone around him, while Spencer's absence became conspicuous. The casual assumptions others made about Luna's life felt obscene in their ignorance. Finn carried the truth like a fracture that refused to heal. At night, he questioned whether Luna had underestimated him, or whether she had seen something in Li that he never had. He wondered if his need for transparency was driven by morality or by wounded pride. The realization that Luna had planned her child's future without him forced Finn to confront his own limitations, not as a father, perhaps, but as a protector. Li, for her part, lived under constant vigilance. Every decision she made carried risk. Every unexpected question felt like a threat. Yet she did not waver. She believed Luna's foresight had been correct. The world was not ready for this child, and perhaps never would be. To reveal the truth now would not bring healing, it would invite chaos. The secret, once discovered by Finn, became something else entirely. It was no longer just Luna's legacy. It was a test of character, loyalty, and restraint. Finn stood at the center of it, knowing that silence made him guardian of a life he had never touched, while truth would ignite consequences no one could fully predict. What Luna had left behind was not merely a child, but a question that refused easy answers. Does love demand honesty, or does it sometimes require disappearance? Interestingly, Luna had chosen the latter. Whether Finn could accept that choice would define not only his relationship with the living, but his respect for the dead. And somewhere beyond their conflict, a child lived unaware of the forces circling their existence, protected by secrecy, shaped by absence, and carrying a legacy that waited, patiently, for the moment the truth would no longer be optional. Truth rarely announces itself with clarity. More often, it arrives disguised as coincidence, concealed within details so small they seem harmless until they refuse to be ignored. For Finn, that truth begins not with suspicion or accusation, but with a child's medical chart and a quiet, professional instinct that tells him something does not add up. At that moment, he does not yet understand that he is standing at the edge of a revelation that will fracture his understanding of loyalty, redefine his concept of family, and force him to confront the cost of protecting others from a truth they never asked to avoid. Before her death, Luna had spoken with certainty about the child she carried. She insisted that Spencer was the father, and she did so not with hesitation but with convictions strong enough to silence doubt. In a world where reputations are currency and alliances are inherited, her declaration was accepted not because it was proven, but because it was convenient. Will's name offered clarity, structure, and an explanation that fit neatly into an already familiar narrative. Luna's insistence closed doors before questions could be asked, and for most people, that was enough. Li, however, had never been most people. Her life had taught her that truth and survival are not always aligned, and that certainty is often the most dangerous illusion of all. Long before Luna's death, Li had noticed inconsistencies that refused to settle. Timelines that did not quite align. Emotional reactions that seemed rehearsed rather than instinctive. Luna's attachment to the story she told felt less like honesty and more like armor. And eventually, quietly and without confrontation, Li uncovered the truth that would change everything. The child was not Will Spencer's. The father was someone else entirely, a man whose existence carried no power, no influence, no name capable of protecting a child from the gravitational pull of legacy and expectation. He was not dangerous, not malicious, and not particularly relevant in the larger structure of Los Angeles society. That, in Li's mind, made him invisible, and invisibility, she believed, was safety. Revealing his identity would not elevate the child. It would complicate the child's future without offering protection in return. Li's decision to keep the truth hidden was not driven by manipulation or ambition. It was driven by calculation shaped by fear. She understood what would happen if the child were publicly disconnected from Will Spencer. Questions would multiply. Motives would be dissected. Luna's credibility would be re-examined, her final narrative unraveled. And in that unraveling, Finn would be drawn into a conflict he neither sought nor deserved. Li believed she was sparing him, sparing the Spencer family, and sparing a child from becoming collateral damage in a war of names and expectations. So Li chose silence. She chose guardianship without acknowledgement. She raised the child with discipline rather than indulgence, protection rather than exposure. She constructed a life that did not rely on legacy but on stability, believing that withholding truth was an act of care rather than deceit. To Li, family was not defined by blood or confession, but by responsibility. And she carried that responsibility alone. Finn's involvement begins innocently enough. Li, needing medical clarity for the child, turns to him not as a son or a confidant, but as a physician. She trusts his professionalism to remain separate from his emotions. Finn agrees without hesitation, approaching the case with the calm detachment his training demands. He conducts routine tests, reviews genetic markers, and examines developmental indicators. At first, nothing seems alarming. The child is healthy, resilient, and quietly observant. Then Finn notices the anomaly. It is subtle, the kind of detail many would overlook or dismiss as statistical variation. A genetic trait that should not exist given what Finn knows about Will Spencer's biology. Eye color that contradicts inheritance patterns. A blood type that does not align. Finn checks the results again, convinced there must be an error. There is none. The data is consistent, repeatable, and impossible to explain away. As a doctor, Finn knows that genetics do not lie. As a man, he knows that people do. The discovery unsettles him in a way he cannot articulate. He does not immediately accuse Li. He does not jump to conclusions. Instead, he begins to observe. He watches how Li interacts with the child, how she avoids certain conversations, how her answers become precise rather than expansive when questions drift too close to origin. The more Finn pays attention, the more the silence begins to speak. His investigation unfolds quietly. Finn reviews records, reconstructs timelines, and revisits moments he once dismissed as irrelevant. He tracks Luna's movements, her absences, her unexplained choices. Slowly, a picture emerges, one that does not contradict Luna's love for her child, but complicates her honesty. Finn uncovers the identity of the real father not through confrontation, but through process. The man exists outside the sphere of power Finn has always known, his life marked by ordinariness rather than influence. The truth devastates Finn not because it reveals betrayal, but because it exposes intention. Luna did not lie because she was careless. She lied because she believed the truth would harm her child more than protect it. She believed Will's name offered safety, legitimacy, and insulation from judgment. In doing so, she placed Finn and Li into roles they never consented to play, guardians of a story that was never theirs. When Finn confronts Li, there is no denial. She does not argue facts. She does not justify herself with emotion. She tells him simply that she chose the path with the least destruction. She believed the truth would destabilize more lives than it would heal. To her, the child's well-being outweighed the principle of transparency. Finn cannot dismiss her logic, and that is what breaks him. He is torn between two irreconcilable truths. One insists that honesty is foundational, that family built on falsehood is fragile by design. The other recognizes that exposure would not serve justice, but chaos. Revealing the real father would not restore balance. It would shatter the fragile stability the child now knows. Finn finds himself questioning the very definitions that once guided him. Is family determined by biology or by care? Does truth always liberate, or does it sometimes wound beyond repair? The emotional toll is relentless. Finn feels complicit in a deception he did not create yet now sustains by silence. He imagines the future, questions the child will eventually ask, identities that will demand answers. He wonders whether protecting the child now merely postpones a reckoning that will be more painful later. Yet he also sees the peace the child currently possesses, untouched by expectation or legacy, and fears that truth would destroy that innocence permanently. Li, steadfast and unmoved, believes Finn's turmoil proves why she was right. Emotion complicates clarity. Attachment invites error. She insists that the child deserves a life unburdened by the chaos of adults who mistake confession for responsibility. To her, secrecy is not cowardice but discipline. Finn stands at the center of this moral storm, unable to retreat into ignorance and unwilling to become judge. The truth has transformed him, forcing him to accept that love, protection, and honesty do not always align neatly. He begins to understand that family is not a fixed structure, but a shifting equation shaped by choice, sacrifice, and silence. The child remains unaware of the forces circling their existence, growing within the boundaries Li has constructed, protected by decisions made long before they could speak. Whether that protection will endure remains uncertain. What is certain is that Finn will never again view truth as absolute, nor family as simple. In uncovering the real father and Li's concealment, Finn does not find clarity. He finds complexity. And in that complexity, he is forced to confront the most difficult question of all. When the truth threatens to destroy what it claims to protect, is silence a betrayal or an act of love? In life, there are moments when time seems to contract, when years of silence, choice, and restraint collapse into a single breath. For Finn, that moment arrives not in a courtroom, not in a revelation uncovered by investigation or logic, but in the sterile, dimly lit stillness of a hospital room. Machines hum softly, indifferent to the gravity of what they are sustaining, while his mother lies motionless, her strength reduced to a fragile rhythm on a monitor. Li, the woman who has always embodied control, discipline, and emotional restraint, is suddenly suspended between life and death. And with that suspension comes the unraveling of a secret she has carried alone for far too long. The accident, or the sudden, devastating illness, depending on how one chooses to name fate, comes without warning. One moment Li is present, precise, commanding her space as she always has, and the next she is rendered powerless, her body betraying the very principles of control she has lived by. Finn arrives at the hospital with a familiar sense of professional urgency, but it dissolves the instant he sees her. This is not a patient. This is his mother. The woman who raised him to value reason over chaos, restraint over indulgence, truth filtered through survival. Seeing her like this fractures something deep inside him, a realization that no amount of medical training can insulate him from personal loss. As Li drifts in and out of consciousness, Finn remains by her side, haunted not only by the possibility of losing her, but by the weight of everything left unsaid between them. Their relationship has never been simple. It has been shaped by expectations, disappointments, loyalty, and silence. Li has always believed that love is best expressed through action rather than confession, through protection rather than reassurance. Finn has learned to accept that, even when it left him emotionally distant from her. Now, confronted with the fragility of her existence, he is forced to reckon with the possibility that silence may have concealed more than he ever imagined. When Li finally speaks, her voice is weak but deliberate, stripped of the sharp authority Finn has known all his life. She does not waste the moment on comfort or denial. She understands, perhaps better than anyone, that proximity to death has a way of clarifying priorities. The truth she is about to reveal has waited long enough. She tells him about the child. At first, Finn does not understand. The words reach him, but their meaning refuses to settle. Li speaks of Luna, of promises made in private, of a child born into circumstances too complicated, too dangerous, too fragile to survive the world unprotected. She tells him that she has been caring for Luna's child in secret, shielding the baby from a legacy burdened by judgment, scandal, and unresolved pain. Each sentence feels like a blow delivered without malice, but with devastating precision. Finn listens in stunned silence as the story unfolds. Li explains that she feared Finn would not be able to separate the child from Luna's past, that he would see not an innocent life, but the shadow of mistakes, lies, and emotional damage. She feared his sense of morality, so carefully constructed around truth and accountability, would reject a child born of secrecy and complexity. More than that, she admits she wanted the baby to have a beginning untouched by the expectations and conflicts that had defined Luna's life. A blank slate. A chance at normalcy. A life not shaped by whispered judgments or inherited resentment. For Li, this decision was never about deception for its own sake. It was about control in the face of chaos. She believed that if she could manage the narrative, if she could remove the child from the reach of powerful names and unresolved histories, she could offer something rare and invaluable: peace. To her, secrecy was not cruelty, but strategy. Love, expressed through restraint rather than exposure. Finn's reaction is immediate and overwhelming, though he struggles to articulate it. Shock gives way to disbelief, disbelief to anger, anger to grief. He feels betrayed not only as a son, but as a man who has dedicated his life to healing, transparency, and ethical responsibility. The realization that his own mother nearly died carrying such a monumental secret fractures his sense of trust in ways he cannot immediately repair. He wonders how close he came to losing her without ever knowing the truth she guarded so fiercely. The thought that she might have taken this secret to her grave leaves him hollow. Yet intertwined with that sense of betrayal is something far more dangerous: compassion. Finn cannot ignore the tenderness with which Li speaks of the child, nor the quiet resolve that underpins her confession. He sees, perhaps for the first time, the cost of the choices she made. The isolation. The vigilance. The emotional restraint required to love a child without acknowledgement, to protect a life while denying it a place in the world. Li did not choose secrecy because it was easy. She chose it because she believed it was necessary. This duality tears at Finn. He feels anger toward his mother for excluding him, for assuming his inability to accept the child, for denying him the opportunity to choose. At the same time, he feels a growing, undeniable connection to the baby he has never known. The idea that an innocent life has been shaped by sacrifice rather than neglect unsettles him. He begins to understand that the child is not a symbol of Luna's past, but of her hope, hope strong enough to entrust to Li, even at the cost of truth. As Li's condition worsens, the urgency of Finn's internal conflict intensifies. Time becomes an unforgiving presence in the room. Every beep of the monitor reminds him that decisions delayed may soon be decisions denied. He is forced to confront questions that offer no clean answers. Does honoring his mother's choices mean continuing the deception she constructed? Or does honoring her now require correcting what he perceives as a fundamental wrong? Is family defined by honesty or by protection? And when those values collide, which one must yield? Finn imagines the future in fragments. A child growing older, asking questions. A truth revealed too late, transforming protection into betrayal. He also imagines the alternative: exposure now, the immediate upheaval, the chaos of claims, judgments, and power dynamics descending upon a life that has known only quiet stability. Neither vision offers peace. Both demand sacrifice. In this suspended moment between life and death, Finn realizes that his mother's near loss has changed him irreversibly. The secret she reveals does not simply add a new chapter to his life. It redefines the foundation upon which he has built his values. He understands now that morality is not always a straight line, and that love sometimes requires choices that defy idealism. When Finn finally speaks, his voice is unsteady, carrying the weight of everything he has yet to resolve. He does not promise Li that he will do what she wants. He cannot. But he does promise that he will not treat the child as a burden, nor as a problem to be solved. He promises to see the child as a life deserving of care, dignity, and consideration beyond ideology. Li, hearing this, closes her eyes, not in relief, but in acceptance. She knows that her time may be limited, and that control, once surrendered, cannot be reclaimed. She has done what she believed was right. What happens next will belong to Finn. As he sits beside her, Finn feels the weight of inheritance not measured in blood or name, but in responsibility. He is no longer merely a son, nor simply a doctor. He is now a guardian of a truth that demands wisdom rather than certainty. Whether he chooses silence or revelation, protection or exposure, his decision will shape not only the child's future, but his own. And as the machines continue their quiet vigil, Finn understands the cruelest truth of all, that love does not guarantee clarity, that family is not defined by certainty, and that sometimes the most difficult choices are born not of malice, but of devotion.